yeah, this is our topic today. It's a little different because it's really coming out of a place of what I've been asked about, especially in these last few weeks, as we've had to shift how our workplaces behave, how our employees engage, and how we deliver service to our customers. So that's what we're talking about today. For those of you who I don't know, because we always have some, I see some names who have been here with us week after week. It's always great to welcome you back. I also see some new names, so welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeannie Walters. I am CEO of Experience Investigators. I've been doing this type of customer experience work for about 20 years, where I consult, I coach, I speak, I train, all these different things. And if you are interested in learning, we have some resources for you. You can certainly reach out to me on all these different platforms that we have. But, you know, we also have some courses at LinkedIn Learning. I have 4 courses there. You can feel free to check those out. And then we also have this 21-day customer experience challenge, which I know a lot of you have participated in. And it's just reminders, it's helpful tasks, things like that, to help you kind of really look at customer experience in your organization. It's totally free. You can sign up and just get the emails. So that's who I am, and I love hearing from all of you. So, you know, those of you who do reach out to me on LinkedIn and things like that, I love hearing from you. So thank you for doing that. So let's talk about why we're talking about this subject, journey mapping as applied to your employee experience. And what I started realizing was I was getting a lot of inquiries from managers, from leaders who were saying, okay, we have a totally new employee experience now. We have a totally distributed team. And, you know, we've been doing these employee surveys, but we are trying to really figure out what is the experience like for our employees and what can we do to support them? Because when we decided, the global we, decided that, you know what, we have to send everybody home, there were huge logistical obstacles in some organizations. And they also, you know, they had to ask their employees to step up in ways that they hadn't talked about in the job interview. They hadn't talked about as part of their plan. So what I want you to do is think about journey mapping as it is, like what are the basics here, and then apply that to figuring out your employee experience. Because I think, number one, our employees deserve this. They deserve our understanding and empathy for what their experience is actually like today. And then the other part of that is, what lessons can we learn right now that can be applied long-term to our employee experience? We're already seeing some big brands respond, like Twitter and Facebook have just announced that their employees can work from home forever. They're starting to really question some of the ways that they had rules and protocols about coming into the office, because they're seeing how productive people can be. So I think it's not just this short-term time that we're talking about. The lessons we get from this, we can apply long-term for sure. So this is actually a slide from one of my LinkedIn learning courses about journey mapping. And I just want you to think about, like, why do we use journey mapping for customers? Well, journey mapping is really about these different things. We want to understand the real journey. We want to find those points of friction so that we can correct them, obviously. We want to uncover duplicate efforts and inefficiencies. And this is the one that, if I had to say, you know, let's apply to employee experience, this is the one I would circle, because I think that there are real opportunities here to help your employees be more efficient and in turn enjoy and engage in better ways too. We can also stress test new products and services with journey mapping. And I think the whole idea of using this with employees is you can start figuring out, how do we define roles? How do we make sure that people are in the right places? All of those things can be done this way too. And then we want to envision those long-term changes. We want to start thinking about that ideal state for employees. And just backing up a little bit, you know, I talk about journey mapping so much that sometimes I forget to define it. And journey mapping on its own essentially is really understanding what is the experience end to end for your customers or for your employees. So what that means is, instead of looking at things from the inside out of our organizations, we're going to flip the script. We're going to use the lens of the employee, of the customer, and walk through their experience. So instead of setting things up, for instance, based on our org chart, where we might say, okay, well, when people apply, that goes into our system, and then that system goes off to recruiting, and then they have to talk to the hiring manager. That's not the experience of your employees. That's the experience inside your organization. That's the process that they might, have to take in your organization. What we need to do is think about what is their experience. So in a customer journey map, we have these different phases of their journey. This is a typical one. Every single one is custom, and you really have to think about your experience and what is actually happening with your customers and your brand. The same thing with your employees. So when we think about, for instance, a lot of times when I ask people, okay, what is the employee experience like? They say things like, well, they apply, they get the job, they have an annual survey, they have a one-to-one every week. That's not really the experience. We have to think a little bigger and at the same time drill in even more narrowly to their experience. So while this might be a typical phase journey for a customer, where they move from awareness, where they're not even sure about your brand, to consideration, where they start thinking, hey, what's this brand about, to selection, which is really when they're seriously shopping, purchase, and then satisfaction, which is where we've met the basics. We have met their expectations exactly where they are, not any better, any less. But what we're really looking for is loyalty and then ultimately advocacy. So when you think about your employee experience, I challenge you to think about these phases a little differently. So instead of applying for the job as a phase, what are they really doing? Well, they're job seeking. They are in a position where they are actively job seeking. And then what happens to put them into that application process? What are some of the challenges that they might have there? Once they're in the application process, once they feel like, okay, they are ready, this is a job that they want, what does that look like when we hire them, when we onboard them, when those first 90 days, those first 6 months, when we promote them? What does that look like for them? What is it like to switch from being in an office to going remote? So there are so many ways that you can build this, and you don't have to do everything all at once. What I encourage you to do is think about, okay, what are the areas that we really need to look at? So these are the different things that can apply to customer or employee journey mapping. But I really want you, I tweaked these a little bit to really think about what is the employee experience and how can we serve them. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the goal. Then we're going to talk about data. We need to pull in data. It's very important. We also need to look for specifically around the employee experience. How can we do this in a way that will reduce anxiety for them? Because they have higher stakes than a customer sometimes in sharing their feedback. What are the original promises we made to them as an employee, and what actions will we take? Because the thing that I see over and over with journey mapping or surveys or just collecting feedback is we all love to collect feedback, but if we're not going to do anything with it, it's frustrating and it can be a waste of time. So we don't want to do that. So here we go. When I talk about knowing your goal, what does that mean? Well, for journey maps, for customer journey maps, we always start here because it's really easy to say, oh, we just want to understand everything. Great. What do we want to understand and why do we want to understand it? We want to get into what is the goal of the map? What is the goal of the actions that we're going to take? So in this particular moment in time, we might say, we want to know how can we support our remote employees for the next 12 to 18 months? That is a great question to answer. That is a great goal. Really get clear on what question are you trying to answer and what is the goal of this, because otherwise it's really easy to go all sorts of different directions and not really get to that outcome that you're looking for. The next thing you want to do is you want to pull data where you have it. A lot of employee experience work, we don't have quite as much data as we do for customers. We might have really robust customer relationship management, CRM systems. We might have really good NPS surveys every year, all these different things. Employees, we might have an annual survey. We might have various things like that we have some data to collect. In some cases, we don't have that. You might not be quite at that maturity level with your employee experience yet. And so you might be thinking, well, we don't even have any data to look at. But I assure you, you do. It might not be as robust. It might not be as formal. But most organizations have, something like a one-to-one or a small group manager meeting. A manager will lead his team or she will meet one-on-one with each member of her team on a regular basis. That might not be formal, that might not be documented, but it's still data. You could still reach out to those managers and say, okay, here's what we want to know. Here's a quick survey. Here's what, please let us know what you're hearing from employees as far as concerns, challenges, etc. So that's one thing. The other thing is you can look for what people are saying about your brand. And I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but if your brand reputation in the world is not great, then you can pretty much pull that thread and realize that your employee reputation is probably not great either. Now flip that, because you can also see a lot of positive things in social media, the way people refer other candidates to you. That's a great metric to look at. How many people who apply to our organization are here because of referrals from other employees? That's a great metric to track. That tells you so much about how your employees feel about their experience. So look for those pieces of data that you can pull into this, because that will give you enough of a running start to really start understanding, okay, there's something going on here. We want to dig in to this part of the journey. Or we've heard that, our employee surveys are great for employees who have been here 18 months or less, but then they start dipping. What does that tell you? Well, that tells you at 18 months, people start getting frustrated, maybe a little less engaged. So that's a great place to look at and say, okay, what can we do about this? So even those of you who are thinking, we don't have any data, I promise you do, but you've got to go look for it. So this is the real challenge with employee experience work. I have seen some really horrible, and I'm sure you have too, meetings with managers where they say, okay, everybody, I've heard that some of you aren't happy. So tell me why you're not happy. And of course, that puts everybody in a terrible position. We don't want to say to our boss, well, actually, I'm not happy with you, boss. We also don't want to say in front of our colleagues, maybe, nobody here works together and I'm doing all the work or whatever. So we need to look for ways to provide safe spaces for employees to give us their authentic feedback. I always say about customer experience work, it's about the hard truths. We need to be really willing to hear the hard truths. This is so true with employee work as well. So I know a lot of people who are looking for ways to do this, and they think, oh, I work in HR, it'll be fine. They trust me. They might not, and it's not personal. It's because they're worried about the politics of the situation. They're worried that, yeah, they might trust you as a person, but they know that this is going to go in some report, and they're worried that their name is going to be associated with it. So we need to provide channels for employees to really provide that feedback in a safe way. There are ways to do this, and I think it's really important to get feedback that is less objective. Sometimes we want subjective feedback. I really like to see people's faces. I like to see the emotion that they bring to it. So one thing that we do with our clients is we actually conduct some of those employee feedback survey or interviews. We do small group interviews sometimes. We do all sorts of things to get that information in a safe way. And what we do is we say, there are no names in this report. Everything gets rolled up to that macro level. So nobody's going to know that this is what you said to me. That's one way. You can do it with a third party. Another way is to have mechanisms where they can call in, they can leave a voicemail to an anonymous line, maybe have a website set up where they can submit information that way. There are different tools available for this, and a lot of employee management software now has some of these features. That's all great, But just remember that if you're asking somebody directly for their feedback, they have a whole bunch of stuff going on that they might want to protect themselves or protect colleagues, or just, they don't know what's going to happen. So they might say, yeah, it's fine, it's great, when it's really not fine and great. And what we want to do is make sure we get the real feedback. Now, the other thing we want to do is go back and think, okay, what were those promises that we made when we brought them on as an employee? What was that agreement? How did we paint the picture of the workplace and the teamwork and all of these things? And the reason we have to stay in touch with that when we're doing mapping is because that's how we know if we are living up to those promises or if we are disappointing them. Time and again, employees will tell you in their exit interviews exactly what disappointed them. And they will use words that are just like when customers say this. They say things like, well, I wish it were different. I wish that others understood the brand, the promise, the expectations. What they're telling you with all of these kind of coded language words is that we didn't live up to the promises made. So really make sure that you're tuned into that, not just when you're mapping, but for any manager or leader out there, it's a great thing to be tuned into. Listen to words like disappointed, listen to words like frustrated. Make sure you're not just blowing that off and thinking, well, everybody gets frustrated at work, right? Which we do, I admit it. But if they're saying things over and over and they're saying it as, you know what, this is really starting to get to me, those words tell you that there's a misalignment of expectations and reality. And so when you can go back and say, okay, tell me what you expected, tell me what we promised you, and really make sure everybody's in alignment on that, that can make a huge difference to your employee experience in general. And then finally, we want to consider what actions will be taken. And what I mean by this is, if we are going to say, hey, everybody, we're going to really invest in time and resources, and we're going to do this great employee journey map, and we're going to get everybody involved, and you really have to kind of campaign this idea and say, we need you, we need your authentic feedback. If you go through all that, and then you have no plan to take any of those bits of feedback and turn them into action, then employees will feel just like customers do when they give you real feedback and it doesn't go anywhere. It starts chipping away at trust very, very quickly. So if you are going to take action, first of all, you need to close that loop with your employees. So if several employees tell you, you know what, this isn't working for me, I don't like the way that we have to have these meetings that could be emails. That's a big common denominator, I think. So why do we have all these meetings? And you hear that from all these different people, and then nothing changes. After the end of this, if they don't see real action around that, then they just think, well, why should I tell you anything? So we need to make sure that not only do we have somewhat of a vision that we will be taking action, but once we know what that action is, we have to close that loop. We have to come back to those employees. It's a great thing to come back to everybody and say, hey, this is what we heard from you. This is what we're doing about it. Or even pull those employees in and say, we're creating a task force to figure this out, and you're on it, and we want your input. Get people engaged with the actions that they need to take, because they're all part of this. They're not, it's not an us versus them in employee experience. It should be a we. And we need to make sure that we are living up to those promises to really fulfill those actions and bring that back to the employees. So that's kind of the high level. What I want you to think about is, where are those areas in your employee experience that could use a little attention, and start there. Because if you can start there with journey mapping, it can give you a lot of the lessons that you'll need to move forward. You can also start really getting those employees involved and invested in what you're doing. Because if you can get a few of your employees to really understand that this is for the betterment of everybody, then what will happen is they'll start advocating for you. They'll start saying to their friends and colleagues there, you know what, I did that survey and I'm really encouraged by what I'm seeing. I think you should do it too. Or I'm going to join the employee experience enhancement task force. And I'm really excited about that. And I hope you'll tell me what you want to see there. So we need to build this in, a similar way as far as the map. We need to make sure that we're getting that the right lens for this map, but then the actions and the recommendations and all those things we have to build together as well. So it's a little inside out and it's a little outside in, but the most important thing is that if we're talking about the employee experience, then we need to make this about the employees, and we need to make sure that their voices are heard and that they are treated in a way that allows them to provide the honest, unvarnished truth for us. Because otherwise, we're just going to be patting ourselves on the back saying, everybody loves it here, it's great. And then the minute that a better offer comes along, you can lose a bunch of employees, and nobody wants that. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful to you. If so, make sure to subscribe. We do these webinars every Friday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn Live and right here on YouTube. And if you've got a question, don't be shy. Ask in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. You're here for your customers. I'm here for you.